any different as it is from any other stream. You guys obviously are expected to be chill and polite and loving toward our guest. And yeah, that is about it. Let's go ahead. Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you are doing well. It's time for an exclusive interview and conversation with the one and only singer and songwriter Rachel Chinouriri. Her EP that dropped, was it last year? Yeah, it had to be last year, right? 4 Degrees in Winter was my EP of the year. So I'm very excited to get Rachel on and have a conversation about that. But mostly I'm hoping to kind of get some insight from you on the EP that you have coming up on... It is May 20th it's dropping, Better Off Without. And, you know, kind of getting a grip of the sound change that you may be undergoing with on that EP and, you know, just basically creatively what your headspace is at right now. But first off, thanks for coming through and making the time.
No, thanks for having me. I feel very excited for this right now.
I appreciate you shifting things around a little bit because you know, admittedly, I fucked up the time zones. I fucked up the time zone shit. And I thought you were like, I think more hours ahead of me than you actually were.
It's all good. I'll be getting confused with the time zones as well, so it's all good.
All right. So, you know, you put out this first single from the EP so far. Like, how has that been going in terms of like the reception, in terms of like, you know, just the numbers that you've been doing and the fact that this one is a bit of a lighter on the ears, kind of very gentle, kind of indie pop, you know, sort of vibe to it?
I think the response has been quite crazy. Obviously, the difference from last year to this year, I think I've increased by like over 1,000% in like listeners and numbers and stuff. And the response to All I Ever Asked, I don't know, it's like kind of undeniably incredible. And it kind of reflects in what the EP has. I know my stuff has been generally a bit darker before, but I think there is an element of me as a person who's quite happier, a bit sunnier, and also it plays into the fact of, you know, who I am as an artist and what I want to be seen as before I go into my album, and just really distinctively putting my foot forward and being like, this is me, and expect something fun for the album.
Were you'd say with this EP you were in a happier place making it than you were on 4 Degrees?
You know what? I think I was actually worse off. I'd just broken up from a 5-year relationship, actually. So I'm not really sure if I was happier. Lyrically, definitely was not happier. But sound-wise, sonically, it definitely is a bit more uplifting than 4 Degrees. But, you know, it's like I'll be singing on stage and I'm like, all right, I want to dance a little bit. But all my songs were so dark and sad. So I was like, I need something else.
I get it. So, you know, would you say that, you know, this shift that you're undergoing and the reception that you've been getting with this new track so far, do you feel like you've kind of hit upon something? Has the reception kind of driven you in a direction where you're like, ooh, this is like my vibe, this is my sound, this is sort of what I want to do? Or do you still feel like at this very early stage in your career that you're still kind of like figuring that stuff out? You still feel like you're in a metamorphosis period where you're kind of exploring different things until, you know, you hit upon something you're really feeling?
I think I definitely know what my sound is at this point. I've been writing for like 5+ years professionally, let's say.
Right.
And I think there's elements. I had an EP before called Mama's Boy. And then I had 4 Degrees in Winter. And then I've got this EP. And I think I've always wanted to be in the indie pop realm and kind of mix it all with electronic. So I know that when I do indie, I know what I want to do. And I know when I do pop, I know what I want to do. And when I do alternative, I know what I want to do. It's just now for the album trying to fuse all those worlds together. So I think this EP is going to be more of my indie side, more of my indie pop side, because the last EP was definitely more alternative, more electronic. So yeah.
And when you're talking about like going into album mode after this, like, are there any kind of expectations or requirements for you personally in terms of like what you want this EP to do or what you want to achieve with it before you feel like you're kind of going into album mode? Or are you already like in a mindset where the EP is done, I'm already thinking about what my album is?
I've already been thinking about the album because I have about 200 songs in a Dropbox right now.
Oh, wow.
And it's like piecing together what direction you want to go in and what message I want to put forward first, because so many albums have like a story. Like, I don't know, Adele's one's like always heartbreak. But then for me, I'm like, right, this EP is my heartbreak one. What am I going to do for the next one? So I think I want to be creatively as free as possible. But also the genre and lane I've put myself in. I just want it to be really clear and distinct so that from after the album, everyone will always know this is Rachel's sound. This is what to expect. I just want it to be my defining moment, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And, is that defining moment kind of like a combination of what you've been doing on your past couple of EPs, like a mixture of all those sounds, or something else entirely different?
I think it's definitely a mixture of all my sounds. This EP, especially the indie side, but 4 Degrees in Winter, I think it was very far one way. Mm-hmm. And this EP is definitely very far the other way. And I want them to like meet in the middle and distinctively shell my whole sound. I want, an album I really love is Sampha's Process album. I love how every track you click on and it feels like a different journey. And I really want my album to be able to relay that. So each different thing is like a different pocket of sound. And it's like, oh, where's this going to take me? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's my goal for the album.
No, I mean, just thinking of also his recent feature on the Kendrick record, like if there's any follow-up that I feel like we need, like sooner rather, it's the Sampha follow-up, like,
I like literally am in love with Sampha. I'm like, I want to write so much with him, but yeah, he's incredible. Mm-hmm.
What would you say generally, like, considering how much I've been able to kind of listen to your past EP and I haven't been able to kind of sink into the new one just yet, like, would you be able to go into and describe, as far as exploring like your indie side and your pop side and your alternative side, again, because I haven't had the chance to listen to it as deeply as I would yet, like typically where do your influences and kind of like, points of inspiration range, to and from as far as that sound goes? Like who are some of your go-to artists that kind of inspire you when you're heading in that direction?
I feel like when I first started listening to music, I was quite not closed off, but when I was younger, the music in the house I was in a Christian house, so it was a lot of gospel music and kind of what my parents would put on. And I was the youngest sibling, so my siblings kind of had control of what was being played. But then I discovered early Coldplay albums, and when I heard like the writing in that, I feel like their writing is very simple, spot on, and it kind of tells the story in a way. So that sort of writing kind of drew me somewhere. Mm-hmm. And then I discovered Daughter, which was very melancholic, very softly sung. And that the tone of her voice and the use of ambience in that really influenced me. And then a lot of South African a cappella music with harmonies and stuff influenced me. So I've always wanted to fuse those three together. But then obviously there's been things like Florence and the Machine, like her first album was like incredible to me when I was literally like 10 or 11. Mm-hmm. Early Labyrinth albums, the XX, there's a band called UMI or Yumi, which I back in the day. X as well. These are just like snippets of things I heard as I was probably in my teens, and we'll just draw small aspects of those things from their music.
Sorry, like hearing you say all that stuff is like it's funny. It makes me feel old because I vividly remember like that era where all of those artists were like kind of breaking out and like popping off. And like at that point I was already like deep into my 20s, very well established in terms of like, yeah, this is what I like. I already know what I like. You know what I mean? And sort of like
11.
Yeah. But like, it's just so funny to think of like, that era, which, you're going to be there as well eventually, where it's like, all these new artists that you're like, yeah, this is kind of cool. But like, that's like some 11-year-olds like mind blowing, like, oh my God, this is music. Like, wow, this is like going to inspire me from here on out. And that's great. And I do hear some of that and like what you do, especially like, kind of the very chill, subtle, like nuances of the XX, like on your new single for sure.
Thanks. Yeah, it's weird because I always am like, oh, I love Coldplay. And every time I told older people, they were like, oh, okay. And I'm like, I stick by Coldplay no matter what. Because when I was literally like 11, it was literally my mind blown moment. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But I love them.
Mm-hmm. So, we one of the things that initiated this conversation is we were kind of having a talk about, your some of your newer music kind of transitioning into more of an indie and alternative space, and sort of like the confusing reception that you were getting on account of that in terms of like people categorizing it a certain way and sort of like not interpreting it as indie, even though in your own mind you were like very consciously like operating in that genre.
Mm-hmm. I think what kind of happened is, especially in the UK, trying to do indie music, there's always been like the urban category, and always being thrown. A lot of black artists get thrown into urban.
Yeah, we have those same categorizations over here too. Yeah.
Oh, so it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's like a very kind of Western radio format based kind of hierarchy.
Yeah, so it's kind of like when I first got into the industry, my manager kind of mentioned it, and my first songs was like things like "So My Darling," a song called "Where Do I Go," and my first EP was quite indie guitarish. But for some reason, they would be like, "Oh, the new daughter Lily Allen, but the hip hop version," and I was like, "Whoa, this is not correct." And I think I noticed myself kind of having this battle, which I was trying to fight, but then also trying to conform to. Music is like my escape, and I started adapting myself as a person. So I think that's where my image got confused and my sound was starting to get confused, because I started taking opinions of so many people, because people were like, "We don't get what you are, so let's try and make you work with what we have." And that's where a lot of confusion in my sound and stuff came about. And then I just hit a point where I was like, I can't carry on like this, because behind the scenes, everyone's so openly is like, "Yeah, you're indie. Yeah, you're this. Yeah, you're that." But on the surface, it just wasn't being translated in that way. Mm-hmm. So I think with this EP, I really want to make it so clear that this is what I do. There's only 4 songs on it. I could have had way more, but I'm like, if I try and be experimental, it will shift people the wrong way. So if I make something which is so significantly clear one thing that people can't confuse it, then it will probably benefit me in the long run. And I guess in a way, I've kind of been like robbed of my true creativity, because I'm kind of like, I have to whittle it down just so it makes sense for other people. But if this is what I have to do, then it's what I have to do, so that my album doesn't have to, be that project that I have to adapt. My album will just be the thing I can creatively focus on by itself.
And, in your experience as somebody who is like trying to, I'll say it's like amazing the amount of gentleness and grace that you're trying to like.
I'm so sorry.
It's totally cool. It's it's impressive the level of grace that you're trying to operate through this, like this misinterpretation with, as somebody who's like trying to very like gently remind people like, no, this is actually what I want to do, or this is the direction that I'm going in. Like, when you're sort of being confronted with those biases, do you feel like it's coming from some kind of like personal place where somebody, there's like kind of a deep-seated racial bias there, or are people just kind of mindlessly giving into what's already kind of been set out before them in terms of like, yeah, this is the marketing strategy in the music industry, and this is what we have to do in order to sell records?
I think it's the unconscious bias and the not understanding that someone or a institution has to be the first person to make the step for something to work out. It's kind of like when artists do make the first step into an industry and do something which is game changing, then everyone kind of follows, but it takes one person to start that motion. And I'm not saying I was the person that started that motion. So many artists have spoken out about, being put in the wrong genres, but I feel like it's definitely super unconscious, and it's just something that needs to be called out, but it also is something where conversations like this are important, or it needs to be spoken about with institutions, because we need to fix it, and we need to find a way to fix it and understand why it is happening, because it's like, it's not my job to fix it because I didn't make it, and it's not other black artists' jobs to fix it because we didn't make this situation that's going on. So yeah, it's a difficult one to try and get around, but I'm kind of like, if this is what I have to do in order for it to benefit me and my creativity, and for me to not adapt my creative process more than I already have in a way, then I guess this is what I've got to do.
Yeah, no, for sure. And to sort of like just kind of put it clear for everybody watching, there is kind of just like this really quick almost urgency, and again, it may be for the sake of like, marketing, to when you do see a black female artist, it's like, oh, well, they must be making R&B, or, regardless of what it is, we have to tell the audience it's R&B, or make sure it's being marketed to an R&B type audience, because that's what they're going to accept, or that's what they're going to want to see or hear, or sort of like, think is going on. And as you say, you're not the only person kind of struggling through this. I mean, recently I reviewed the new Kilo Kish record, which is, fantastic. And she as well was kind of expressing on social media, that people are saying there's R&B on my record. Like, where's the R&B? There's no R&B on my record at all. I dare you to find the single track that sounds like an R&B song. It's not what I do. You know, it's something that she's flirted with a little bit in the past, but it's like definitely not what she's touching down on here.
Yeah, and it's kind of like I never really want to compromise my blackness in order to fit a certain image. I feel like the last project I don't really know what I was doing, but now it's like things like my surname, even things as small as like your surname. I decided to keep my African surname for a reason, but sometimes I'm like, has that had an impact on people hearing the name and assuming something rather than changing my name? Or is it like when I have braids, does that put forward an image of me as R&B? However, that shouldn't really have a factor. And things like my lashes and nails, etc., it's like I don't want to have to water that down in order to be accepted into something, because that's just image, and you should be listening to the music first rather than looking at who I am. Obviously you have to have some sort of aesthetic or something, but I feel like as a person, it would be false for me to change, to kind of downplay my blackness in order to suit a certain image. And I want to find a way to make it all work as one.
Yeah, it's just kind of, you know, a little strange that we're still at a point societally and culturally where we're still kind of coming grips to the idea with like black pop artists, even though, you know, I think I've said to you before, like, you know, culturally we know the king of pop to be Michael Jackson. And it's like, you know, how after that could there be any debate over the legitimacy of black artists in the pop space? But it's kind of like, you know, ever since him, the genre's been sort of like, you know, dominated more instead by, and, you know, obviously no shade, but like, you know, your Katy Perry's and your Taylor Swift's and your Lady Gaga's, and it, you know, just sort of seems to have kind of shifted into just more of a white female space. And it's kind of like anything that doesn't work, you know, anything that doesn't fit in that rubric doesn't really kind of get, you know, not that it doesn't get play, but it doesn't get sort of categorized in that way, you know?
And it's kind of like, it's seen as somewhat confusing that if one image, obviously those women are incredible, but there's a certain image, white woman being seen as the forefront of that. But then when other people, POC, black people, try and enter that space, it's kind of like, oh, we can listen to it, but there's hints of this and there's hints of that. And it's kind of extra hurdles that you have to go through to make it to those spaces. Like even for me, an extra hurdle is I've had to now water down my EP because I have to make it make sense to other people, or I have to dress a certain way, or when I'm promoting my show, I have to call out promoters and be like, hi, I'm not R&B, please take it down. These are just small extra hurdles that, you know, white people don't really have to go through just to make their art. But it's kind of like so many black artists and POC artists have to go through those extra hurdles just to get their music out there. I'm literally on TikTok like 10 times a day, and I'm like, I don't really want to be on TikTok 10 times a day, but if I have to do that until I get found, then that's what I'm going to have to do.
I did want to touch down on your TikTok page a little bit later. I wanted to ask you before we kind of like hop off this topic, or at least kind of get this one other thing I wanted to ask you about with it. I mean, obviously, as you say, you're kind of dealing with these misconceptions and hurdles and presumptions in terms of like the way your music is being received and perceived and marketed. But like, you know, what about personally when you're operating in these spaces artist to artist? Because I know you're a fan of a lot of different indie artists and modern indie artists, especially some who are out in the UK, like you've connected with some and written with some. You know, what is it like when you're usually dealing artist to artist? Is it just kind of like, you know, sure, we'd love to connect with you, you're great, you know, it's you know, we're not going to presume this or that about you, we just want to work and we just think other artists are cool? Is it, you know, you know, do you feel the same kind of pressures in those spaces as well, or is it a bit more open?
It's definitely more open. It's funny because it's like artists say it's like the suits. Because you know, music business, there's the music, the creatives, and then there's the business side. And obviously as creatives, our job is to just be creative and hand it over to the people who will work to promote it and stuff. And speaking to other artists, I've never had that issue of being called R&B. And even when you speak to other artists, no matter what the race are, they're always like, oh yeah, of course, you're not R&B, you're not this. And then you speak to like the business side and they'll be like, okay, well, how do we do this? And how do we do that? And, you know, I've been fortunate enough for my managers to know that this would be an issue and to always fight against it. And my management kind of turned into a label after. So it's kind of like my label and my management, they've always got my best foot forward, but it's like speaking to the suits, it can be so stressful, and even my team can see, and my label can see how stressful it is. The more and more I've spoken to them about it, and yeah, it's just an ongoing battle. But I'm now taking the reins and being like, I'm gonna fight it myself, and they're like rooting behind me, like, ooh.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things that I enjoy. You know, I don't want to distract from the music, but like that's one of the things I enjoy about you, the more that I kind of pay attention to what you do, because in terms of promoting yourself, you're very persistent and very industrious, and you do seem like if somebody else isn't going to do it the right way, I'm going to grab the bull by the horns and do it. And you know, your social media presence very much reminds me of that as well. You know, I've been on TikTok quite a bit. I'm like, you know, I feel almost ashamed of the grind that you put into it sometimes. It makes me like feel like I need to get back on there and do it more often. But you know, it's you have quite the TikTok following of people that just kind of love what you do. I mean, as you know, as an artist, and when people ask me like, hey, I'm an independent artist, I'm trying to get my stuff out there, like, you know, I see TikTok these days as very much like kind of a foundry of music promotion. I mean, has it been that for you, or is it just sort of more like a pain in the ass, or both?
100%. I'd say the pain in the ass end of it is how much I TikTok, and that's a personal problem. that's not anything.
So you actually do want to be on TikTok 10 hours a day?
I do want to be on TikTok, but I also have an addiction issue with TikTok, so I need to, that's a personal issue. But I think for promoting yourself, I think the app is incredible, because it's kind of like the kids on there and the people on there, they are in control of the app. It's kind of really funny trying to see like labels trying to figure out what TikTok is. They're just like, oh, so what algorithm and this and that, and no one can figure it out. And I'm like, it's because the people are literally running the app. The people choose who's going to be popular. They choose what sounds are going to work. They choose what's going to go viral. You just have to post enough and hope that they find you and pick you to be that person. I'm so sure TikTok has no specific algorithm. Like Instagram, I'm like, if I post at 8 p.m, I'll be all right. If I post at 10 in the morning, I won't get this many likes. TikTok, you literally don't know. You can post something with no hashtags and it goes completely viral, and you're like, why did that happen? So yeah, it's kind of like a people run app, and the community on there is great. And those are the people who've put my music out the most. And those are the people who are consistently like, you are indie, alt pop. And it's been so heartwarming having TikTok. So it's been great.
Yeah, I mean, in my own experience, you know, the algorithm is engagement. The more, you know, you get engagement on a certain thing, the more it just sort of shoves it down people's throats. And that's like really all there is to it. For whatever reason that people engage with any given thing. You know, and in my experience, it's good sometimes to not overthink anything. My most popular videos on there are just me doing stupid shit, and the stuff that I think the most of like gets no play and gets no attention. But if I just get on there and do something stupid, like it just pops off.
I've realized that as well. I just got notifications today, loads of them. I was like, what is going on? And a video I made of me pretending to talk to my best friend at her funeral had 1 million views, and I'm like, well, why don't my songs have 1 million views? And I posted it so long ago, but it'd just be my stupid videos that go viral, and I kind of love it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for you personally, when, you know, you are kind of like pushing your songs on there, does that usually, and I've seen other people on there, like, it's funny. I've talked to and I've seen people on there who have like platinum songs, but the thing is like, they don't have PR. They don't have this, they don't have that, they don't have any like music industry connections or whatever, at least like they didn't previously before their song just kind of went insane for whatever reason. You know, the attention and the action that you get over there, do you see it transitioning into like streams on you know, your tracks on various platforms?
100%. I think in December I had, for example, in terms of Spotify, I had 250,000 monthly listeners, and I've kind of been between 200,000 and 250,000 for probably like 3 or so years. And you know, you could still work and be a living musician off of that alone, especially in the UK. But then when So My Darling went viral on TikTok, I hit 1 million monthly listeners, and then I almost hit 2 million monthly listeners. And the opportunities that has given me, and the people you speak to and the studio sessions you get into has been like unreal, and that is literally purely from TikTok. Like there's an app for Spotify where you can see how many people are listening at the moment. And when So My Darling started going viral, I literally went on there and it was like over 1,000 people listening, and usually that was on like 100, and I was like, whoa, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's definitely translated a lot from TikTok.
And you know, do you feel like you know, when you're on there, and I sort of see you like in a position where you're almost like, you know, just completely chill, you're kind of like almost guard down and everything, like, you know, do you feel like you're creating, or, you know, could possibly be creating almost like an overexposure thing, or do you think the internet almost like demands that at this point? Like,
I feel like on the internet, I've always been, I kind of hate being prim and proper on the internet sometimes. And I was kind of like, when I started TikTok, it was definitely a case of my managers being like, hey, Rachel, try this out. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. And I tried to be, you know, dress nice, all this stuff. Then one day I just made like a video on my do-rag in bed. And I was like, everyone, just listen to my songs, please. I've given up. And right. I woke up, it had 500,000 views. I was like, right, well, if it's this easy, that's exactly what I'm going to keep doing until the end of time. And now, even now, I just post a quick video like, hey, listen to my songs. Okay, bye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just asked and it happened.
Yeah. I was just like, if you don't ask, you never know. And until people get completely pissed off, I will keep doing that.
Mm-hmm. You know, what is, you know, your experience been like as you've been kind of transitioning into this budding music career, as you've obviously like stayed close to your family and everything as well? Like, you know, what is it like for you personally, kind of balancing either the obligations of that or just any young person's life along with trying to grow this music career on, you know, the side until it totally takes over everything?
I feel like I've kind of been training for this for some time. I went to a creative arts school called Brit School in the UK. People like Adele, Amy Winehouse, even like Tom Holland. So many people went to that school, and even now it's just churning out people. Black Midi went there, Olivia Dean went there. It's like, and they were in my year, so that's fun. And when I was in Brit School, they kind of trained us about the industry. I was in musical theatre, but they still train you about the industry. So I kind of had 2 years of training in school. And then when I was 18, I got a manager, and I've always been doing sessions, live shows. Outside of the internet, I've kind of been an artist full time on just a very low level, but I know what it takes. So when my stuff started going viral online, it's kind of like I've already been doing all these things and kind of had the luxury of practicing them for a very, very long time. And now I've managed to find my balance, but I've kind of been training it for so many years. It kind of feels like my norm. Mm-hmm. And all my friends are from my college. So it kind of feels like all of our norm to be creative and have our personal lives. Because even when the people you date are in the creative industry, and it's just my whole world is just a load of creative people. So it's kind of been, I want to say easy to navigate, but I've had the luxury of being trained and not being a huge artist while I've been doing all this stuff. And now, hopefully, the more success I get, I've already made all the previous mistakes when no one was really watching me.
Are you, you know, though that can almost be the appeal in a way, because you know, with you and a lot of other people too, you know, I think also Doja Cat serves as a very strong example of this, where, you know, you can just kind of, I was just seeing a video today, or I was reminded of a video today on my Twitter feed that somebody used as a reaction video, where it was her reciting the lyrics to The Box, but in sort of like an old English, sort of like, you know, medieval times, like play sort of way, with a chainmail on her head. And I'm like, this is not what pop stars used to do back in the day. Like, this is not. And, you know, it sort of seems like almost the point is, if you have a personality there behind whatever the industry is broadcasting to people, like the idea is to put it out there and shove it in people's faces, so that there is like some kind of relatability, you know, factor there. And yeah, I mean, I guess I just wanted to say that I feel like, you know, kind of breaking the fourth wall is almost the point at this point.
I feel like I'm kind of like an internet kid. I've got 4 older siblings, and it's weird because I'm old enough to remember not having Wi-Fi and not being able to use the landline at the same time as the internet and phones coming out and YouTube beginning. But I'm also young enough to have kind of had that my whole life. Like I remember it before, but I also have had it all my life. And definitely since I was young, I've always been the internet kid. Vine, Tumblr, all that stuff. I've always done lives, had a lot of internet friends. I've also always been good at that social media aspect of things. So it's kind of translated that now the more work I'm doing in the music industry and becoming an artist, to me, just being goofy on the internet is kind of feels like the norm because I've been doing it probably since I was like 11.
Right.
But I guess for my team, they were kind of like, no, okay, you're like funny sometimes. Sure, do what you want. And Doja Cat is just an incredible example of that. She's so funny and so silly online. Even now, as big as she is, the selfies she'll be posting just kill me off. And I love that side of her. And I think a lot of us internet kids are kind of like that. And a lot of people see appeal to it. Yeah,
no, for sure. I wanted to ask you, like, in terms of you know, the reception that you're getting now and what you're hoping to achieve with this EP, like at this point, are you kind of planning on building any kind of, you know, huge tour behind what you do? Do you feel like, you know, the reception is there yet? Or are you, you know, sort of envisioning that more for like the album when you eventually kind of get to that point?
I'm currently on my first tour. I'm just like a little break in between because I have some stuff that I need to do for the EP. But I think for my album, I definitely want to do another one of my own tours. And I do want to open maybe for someone really good. I don't know who, but I'd love to open for a really big artist. Obviously, I said how I trained in Brit School because I was so shy when I was younger. So I forced myself to do musical theatre to learn how to perform. I used to cry like every time I performed. But because I've been training, I started live shows in 2019. Then 2020, we were like, cool, showtime. Obviously, that didn't happen. So I haven't actually had that much experience live. But I've made a lot of mistakes live in the past and I now understand myself. And with this first tour, it's been going so well. So now I'm like, okay, I've got my internet side on point, I think. Now I want to get my real life side on point, you know, my real self on point. And the live shows currently have been going super well. So I think for my album, I want to do a big tour. I also want to come to America.
Well, yeah, that's why I asked. There were some questions in chat being like, when is she going to come to the US? When is she coming to the US? So yeah, that's why I asked.
I came to LA once. I did not want to come back. I loved it so much. And I really want to go back to the US because a lot of the people on TikTok are from the US. So I feel like if I did a live show in the US, it'd make a lot of sense.
No, for sure. You know, I want to dig into something really quickly that you just kind of mentioned, and I've seen you kind of go into it on your TikToks as well, where I believe you were posting like a live video of you performing and like maybe sort of like accompanying that with like internal thoughts in your head, like, okay, don't cry now. I don't want to cry. Like, you know, for you personally, where does that come from? Is it kind of like a nervousness thing, or is it when you're thinking of your songs and they're coming from an emotional place, it drives you to, you know, tears or something like that? Like, you know, what is that internal struggle for you where you're kind of like trying to fight to maintain, you know, sort of like some kind of emotional composure?
I don't know. I feel like I've started crying on stage ever since I started therapy. I highly advise therapy. Therapy is great. But my therapist has not helped my live performances at all. My songs are very personal and the stories are literally exactly what I've gone through. So I think before I was very able to sing them, but even when I'd sing them, I think I was a bit flat. And now I really think about what I'm saying in my songs and then I can just feel it coming out and I'm like, oh crap. And then I've got this internal, I'm still a little bit shy internally. And then that starts coming out because I'm like, oh, I'm going to mess it up. And then it's kind of like a funnel that comes out. And I have even like, I think my show 2 days ago, I burst into tears on stage. But it's also people who are watching me can kind of relate to it because we've all kind of had that experience and it makes all of us upset. And it's like, I don't know, that human connection thing. I was kind of like, I'm not going to be embarrassed that I cry on stage. And I'm not going to be embarrassed that I'm letting my emotions out because I'm also letting my emotions out through song. So yeah, it's definitely internal nerves, but it's also the vulnerability of my songs and realizing what I'm singing about that factors in with that. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, honestly, just keep practicing, you know, all your technical stuff vocally, and as long as you're hitting the notes, just let it be a fucking waterfall, just like, you know, just soaking all your clothes and just leaving a puddle on the stage, like whatever, you know.
Wow. Because I'll be on stage and I'll be like, oh gosh, I need my concealer. And I have this issue where I say things out loud before I think as well. So like even the last time I was on stage, I was like, oh, I'm going to call Amy, my therapist. And then I heard laughing on my in-ears. I was like, oh crap, that was out loud. And I just say stuff out loud on a whim. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I will let the waterfalls fly out.
Go for it. I wanted to ask you, maybe before we head out, about what you're seeing so far in terms of like either online or in person when you're performing, like, you know, your audience, because, you know, thinking about some of the topics we were discussing earlier, you know, over the years, especially in the social media age where people are able to just kind of like express what's going through their mind, you know, I have seen a lot of instances of, you know, POC artists who are, especially when they're kind of, you know, working with an appeal that almost like, you know, may transition into more of an indie or an alternative world, but then also straddle like, you know, kind of an appeal in that R&B world as well, where they don't feel like they're quite connecting to the audience or audiences of people that they want to connect to. And I'm wondering if, like, personally, you feel like you're kind of struggling with that as well, you know, and not to imply it to be, you know, a struggle. Any audience is great, obviously, but, you know, when you envision the people who your songs are for, you know, or who you would like to see kind of indulging in what you do, like, do you feel like those people are hearing you out and giving you a chance?
I think 100%. I feel like I always write my songs for me because the songs are me and my story. But when it comes to connecting it with an audience, I feel like I'm super friendly. So even online, I am messaging, texting, duetting, all like hundreds of people a day just because I love chatting to people online. And then I'll meet people and they'll be like, oh, DM'd me. And then I can someone who I've just met and have an entire conversation about my life. And then I love hearing about their own stories and their lives. So kind of when I meet people, especially when they already know my music, I kind of already feel like I know them because they'll be telling me stuff about my songs. And then I'm like, oh, so you know part of me. And then I can ask them about themselves. And I already feel like I'm their friend. So even when it comes to live performances, I kind of feel like I'm in a room full of my friends and people even just shout out stuff about my songs. And it kind of feels like a group therapy session. But yeah, I feel like I don't really struggle with that aspect. But I think my online persona and being able to chat to so many people online and being comfortable with that has helped me translate that into real life. I'm quite a chatterbox, really. So yeah.
You know, having songs that millions of people are listening to is quite the icebreaker, is really quite the icebreaker, you know, like really makes a conversation easy to kick it off.
Like even So My Darling, I wrote about my friend Marcus. Love Marcus, he's a great guy. And people will come up to me and be like, oh my gosh, fuck Marcus. And I'm like, what? I'm like, how do you know this? And I'm like, oh yeah, I wrote a whole song about the guy. And he's actually really lovely, but it's clear they've translated it as like a massive heartbreak. But for me, the translation is I love him so much as my best friend. So yeah, some be so caught off guard with that stuff.
Those are like that's like deadly Taylor Swift levels of like dedication right there from the fans. Like, you know, because anybody who she writes about, like, it automatically they're on the shit list.
Yeah, they're literally like cancelled straight away. And I'm like, we are not cancelling Marcus. Marcus is actually super lovely and he actually has done nothing wrong.
You're gonna have to be careful. Anybody who ends up being the subject of a song could end up being on a hit list. Yeah. So I'm gonna have to be super careful with who I write about now. Right, exactly. Is there anything coming down the pipe that you want to let everybody, you know, sort of know is on the way before you know, head out? I know you do have those few more dates left in the tour that you're doing. Is there anything else to keep an eye out for?
I've got a block party tour that I'm doing, which is fun. I'm opening for Sam Fender in Finsbury Park as well. And And then the album, I have a few, like a couple things, but I need to like 100% confirm them before I say them here. And my managers are like, stop talking. So there are definitely some, probably 2 or 3 super exciting things happening, but I'll tell you those myself later.
Don't now the audience knows that I'm going to get secret information. And they're gonna be like, now they're gonna bother me. Now they're gonna be like, what did Rachel tell you? Now I'm gonna have to keep it a secret.
But yeah, I think I've got a very exciting year, and I think the album, hopefully, it does what it needs to do, and I think I know what it needs to do, but hopefully it translates in the right ways.
Okay, cool. All right, fingers crossed. Well, Rachel Chinouriri, thank you very much for coming through. You've been a great guest.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks again for making the time. And yeah, you know, obviously everything having to do with Rachel, we will link down below. The new EP is coming out May 20th. That's in a few days. It's going to be a weight off your shoulders.
I know. All the
she's already told you what it's going to sound like and what direction it's going in, how concise it's going to be. So get ready and look forward to it. All right. Have a good one.
Thank you so much, Anthony.
All right, bye.